Today about interstates, freeways, and motorways, and how these came about in the 1950s, 1960s. The biggest example of these are the interstate system in the United States, built under the Eisenhower administration during the Cold War, the height of the Cold War. And we'll talk about that today and give you that story. Stick around. We'll be right back with that. Hi there, smart drivers. Welcome to what day are we on? Day number 28. We're almost at a month here through the month of April. D. Yorker is here, Corey's here, Bricks for Wheels, and Eric is here from Minneapolis, Minnesota, where it is a balmy 64 degrees there. It's about 18 degrees Celsius, which is very nice, very balmy. And the title of the live stream today, How We Learned to Love the Bomb and Escape Cities. And if you haven't seen Doctor Strangelove, I highly, highly recommend it as a pinnacle film on the Cold War and, you know, how everybody in the world was afraid of nuclear war and the mad, mutually assured destruction and whatnot between the United States of America and Russia. As most of you know, the United States of America dropped 2 nuclear bombs at the end of the Second World War to end the war in Japan on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And by 1949, the USSR had that technology and then became the Cold War, which was basically the standoff between Russia and between the United States of America. And it was probably its coldest in the 1950s. It did extend into the 1960s, particularly with the Vietnam War, which was one of the proxy wars, into the 1980s. And Ronald Reagan certainly didn't do anything to, ease tensions between the United States and Russia as well. So Frederick is here from Denmark, and Janet is here from Ontario. And just letting you know that Saturday will be the last daily live stream that I'm going to be doing. I actually talked to Evan Carmichael this morning and was talking about the channel and some other people's channels as well. Some really good feedback, and I think I finally figured out, after almost 4 years, the direction that I need to go with this channel. And once I get this channel going and making the money that I am convinced it will make, then I am going to start another channel. So we'll see what happens. D. Yorker, the state of Georgia, which is where I live, is letting people get their license without taking the road test, temporary until social distancing is passed. I think that is a terrible idea. D. Yorker, why do you think that's a terrible idea that people are issued temporary probationary licenses? I'm curious about that. Okay, so basically the interstate system in the United States of America is probably one of the most extensive freeway systems in the world. Freeways were not new when the interstate system was built in the United States of America in the 1950s. And there were definitely motorways and freeways in other countries around the world. But really the height of building freeways and interstates really came about in the 1950s. The idea, and I'll show you this picture here, in my dissertation, the Punch magazine, which was a major publication out of England, in the 19th century and the early 20th century, caricaturized freeways and motorways. So, and in 1906, I found this cartoon. Let's see if you can see that. Yeah, there we go. Okay. So essentially, they're coming up with an idea of how to deal with the motor car, and essentially it's an early rendition of a freeway. And the crazy thing about that today is that even though they were making fun of it and drawing cartoons about it in 1906, these ideas that they were making fun of have come to bear. Freeways are limited access highways. There's no pedestrians, there's no intersections, there's no bicycles, there's no slow-moving traffic. All of this is what a freeway and an interstate is. So we have these. Okay, Wheelman, my friend, is from Portugal. At a truck stop loaded with recycled paper, completing a rest of 45 minutes. Awesome. And Wheelman, yesterday I didn't get a chance to write back on Instagram there. I sent you the picture of the W900 that was parked downtown. And I, I was a few blocks away and I saw it parked there, and I thought to myself, oh, I got to take that picture for Wheelman. So I went over and took a picture of the truck. Actually, I think the driver was sitting in the truck, because after I walked away, the truck drove off, and so I thought that was great. D. Yorker, because users can take advantage of that for the right or wrong reasons, especially they don't know how to drive. I think you're underestimating, D. Yorker, that a lot of young people actually believe that they know how to drive. Let me address this. You know, I'm a traffic safety specialist. I've been studying traffic and driving and defensive driving and you know, all kinds of things for a very long time now, you know, since 1997, so more than 30 years. I am very much, and I am not the only one. I have talked to other people. Of course, they're never going to go on record saying this, but I'm going to go on record saying this, that this whole GLP, GDL program thing is not working. It hasn't worked since its inception, right? And what it has simply done has put so much bureaucracy in the way of young people getting a license that many of them are postponing their license. So my thinking is that, you know, authorities can say, oh, we've reduced the number of fatalities and crashes amongst young people. Well, of course you have, because there aren't as many young people who are getting their license, because they're postponing it into the 20s and into 25. So my thinking, and other people's thinking as well, is give them a license. Let them go out and figure out how to do it. They're no more dangerous than they are in a GLP program or a GDL program. You know, and they're going to be fine. These people, you know, most of these people who are not comfortable with driving are going to self-regulate. They're going to get somebody to help them. They're going to work in parking lots and those types of things. It's the same thing with senior citizens. We know that the number of crashes for young people is really high. We know that the number of crashes per mile for senior drivers is also really high, but they self-regulate. Senior drivers don't drive at night. They don't drive out of areas that they don't know. They don't drive on highways. They self-regulate. It's the same with young people. They self-regulate. So let's see how this goes. And I would be, you know, if you could somehow get a hold of the numbers and the statistics, I don't think that, you know, what's happening under the GLP, the GDL, you know, that's the same program. It's just named slightly differently. That you would see the number of crashes or accidents going up any more than if you just give people a license and let them go. So, Damon, glad to see you again telling stories. I absolutely love Freeways. I went out to Caraville the other day, and the scenery en route I-10 was of immense beauty. Spring, it's absolutely beautiful. The magnolia trees here in Vernon, the blossoms are out on the stone fruit trees. Just magic. I was a bit unsettled at all the warning signs about falling rocks, though. Yes, we talked about that the other day, Damon. In the wintertime, water freezes, and it expands, creating spaces in between the dirt and the rocks and those types of things. And then when it goes back to water, when it goes back to liquid in the spring, it leaves those holes and spaces and cracks and whatnot in the dirt and the rocks and whatnot, makes it dangerous. Corey, on the other hand, still need to pass knowledge tests. I'd imagine actual driving is practical experience, starting with parking lots, something I notice a lot of programs don't focus on anyway. No, absolutely they don't, Corey. They don't do enough of that. Eric, younger person seems at times inexperienced. And absolutely, Eric, they are inexperienced. And, you know, driving is not a spectator sport. It's something that you have to get behind the wheel and you have to do. And unfortunately, there's risks involved. And, you know, in my personal opinion, it is time to abandon these GDL, GLP programs. They are not working. They are simply not working. They're not providing a safe arena for young people to learn how to drive. And I could rack my brain about what that might look like, what that might be, Eric, you've hit the nail on the head. How do we get young people to have experience driving? The other thing that goes into this is the fact that a lot of young people, most of us, 75% of the world's population now lives in cities. By living in cities, many of us have access to public transportation. Young people use public transportation. And you know, in many places, public transportation is absolutely excellent. Melbourne, Australia, for example, you know, it's the public transportation is absolutely excellent. You know, New York City, public transportation is great. I don't know about LA. I don't think it's as good in LA or Los Angeles. You know, but if you have access to public transportation, a lot of young people are going to take public transportation. If I had access to good public transportation where I live here, I would take public transportation. When I lived in Melbourne, Australia, I took public transportation. I didn't own a car for 8 years. This is the other factor that's playing in for young people, is that they don't need vehicles, especially if they're living in a city. They're just going to take public transportation. So how do we get these people to get experience? So DC is here. Jonathan tuning in from New York. That's awesome. Wheelman, it is hard these days in Canada to obtain a CDL. In the 90s, it was quite tough. Getting a CDL is tough. And again, this is another question, Wheelman. How do we get CDL drivers to get experience? Because as you know, there's a big transition from driving your personal passenger vehicle to driving a tractor trailer unit and getting a tractor trailer unit in and around urban areas. I mean, out on the freeway and motorways, it's not a big deal. You know, you point the thing down the road and away you go, and it's not a big deal. But you know, how many times I repeated to CDL drivers or drivers pulling trailers, topside driver, topside, going around the corner, going around the curve to get to that outside. And I can follow a tractor trailer driver down the highway and I know instantly whether that tractor trailer driver has any experience or not. The ones that have experience, the ones that are paying attention, are the ones that are getting to the top side of the curve every time they go around a curve and corner. A tractor trailer unit always moves within its lane side to side, laterally, to compensate for the off-tracking of the trailer. And for those of you who don't know what off-tracking is, the trailer wheels, way back there, take a shorter path than the steer tires. So if you're going way outside, the trailer tires are cutting off that corner. So you have to compensate for that cutting off corner. And that is the hardest thing to teach new drivers, and you know, not running into stuff and not backing in on the blind sides and whatnot. I know there are times that you do have to back in on the blind side, but at all costs, avoid backing in on the blind side. Jonathan, did you hear that teens in Georgia State are getting their driver's license without taking the road test due to COVID-19 situation? Parents are worried. What's your opinion? That's what we're talking about here, Jonathan. Not Damon. Sorry, my apologies. D. Yorker was just saying that. Jonathan, time will tell, but I don't think you're going to see a huge rise in crashes. I think it's fine. Personally, I've been saying this for years. We're wasting so many resources in testing young people and putting them in the GLP and GDL program that, I've said for years, just give them a license and let them figure it out, because I am convinced the GDLP and GLP programs, they're not working. Okay, Damon's, my parents refused to make the slight revisions to their lives that would have helped me learn to drive safely. I can't comment on that, Damon. Jonathan, getting a CDL from my experience was challenging, but that's what makes it so good to get it, and keeping it has a job value. Absolutely, it has job value, Jonathan. Absolutely. Wheelman, is it policy of the MTO examiners of weeding out the weak sisters with their ill disposition? Wheelman, I'm going to ask you this question. I mean, you're dealing with MTO examiners, and some of them, yes, are grumpy. And when I used to teach drivers, I was grumpy because learning to drive a truck, as you will, I suspect, agree with me, Wheelman, is that when you're driving a truck is not easy. It's tough, and you have to make some tough decisions when you're learning to drive truck. And here's one of the things that happened to me. We got out of the truck. I was teaching a woman at the school, and I'm a tough teacher when it comes to CDL driving. I really don't have a whole lot of sympathy for you, because when you're trying to figure it out on your own and you're trying to figure out how to back into a loading dock, you got to do it. There's nobody else that's going to do it for you. So we had to back into the into the school where we parked the trucks there. And she got the truck backed up into the parking lot, and then she kind of fell apart, and she wouldn't do it. And I said to her, I said, okay, well, you got to do this. I said, well, just wait. Take your time, have a cigarette, walk around the truck, get yourself sorted out. You have to back the truck in. And she complained about me to my boss. My boss says, well, you got to help these people out. I said I was helping her out by preparing her to be ready for a job, because I'm not going to be there when she's working for a job. And if she doesn't get back in the truck and back it in, then she's not going to have a job. And, you know, that's just kind of who I am when I teach people how to drive. That you eventually, I'm trying to set you up so that you can go on and do this by yourself. Not that you're going to have somebody holding your hand every time you're trying to back up or do those things. And, you know, Janet, Jonathan, Wheelman, I know that all of you can tell me the same thing, that you get into situations where you're like, oh my God, how am I going to get this vehicle in there? How am I going to do this? But you have to figure it out. Ryan, what is the topic today? Is it expressways? Yeah, we kind of got off on other things because I was kind of interested in that topic about Georgia giving its licenses out. Corey, I feel they will never get rid of these feel-good regulations regardless of ineffectiveness. The intent of them sounds good, public safety, so imagine the negative PR. Oh, absolutely, Corey. No, you are spot on with what you just said there. They will never, the governments will never claw back the GLP program. They have far too much time, energy, and propaganda invested in saying that these topics are working. Jonathan, no huge rides and crashes in Georgian states. I don't know, but I would say the teens need supervising experience from their parents. And exactly, Jonathan, what I was saying before was his parents are going to regulate their teens. They're going to, put requirements on their teens, right? They're going to impose the rules. Teens are going to self-regulate, as do seniors, because if teens aren't comfortable, a lot of teens aren't comfortable getting on an expressway, getting onto an on-ramp. So many young people who ask me questions about how to safely get on a freeway, they're going to self-regulate. It is not going to be the big problem that everybody thinks it is. Everybody's going to get up in arms, go, oh my God, Georgia's just handing out. I think in the end you'll see it. Everything will be fine. Everything will be fine. Janet, I found it interesting driving in town because until you drive a transport or snowplow, you don't realize the angle, curbs of corners, and the overhanging trees. Yes, Janet, as I used to say to students, and I still say to students, CDL drivers all the time, trees and buildings like to take bites out of trucks, so stay away from them. And what you're talking about there in terms of corners, depending on what city or town you're in, some corners you go up to the street corner and it's square. And those are the worst to get tractor trailers around. That going around the corner, that's called display, how much the corner is rounded. And if you go to major intersection, those corners are really, really rounded off to accommodate larger truck traffic. And that's the thing, what Janet's talking about in terms of going around a corner in a tractor trailer is one of the skills that you have to develop. And the only way that you can develop that skill in a tractor trailer is by experience. You come up and you're able to look at the corner as you're coming up to it, and you can figure out very quickly how much room, how far, if I'm going to turn right, for example, at the intersection, how much do I have to move that unit left to get that unit around the corner safely. And that is something that you got to do on the fly. And that is something when you're driving around cities, you got to figure out on the fly. And Jonathan probably knows that as well. Driving around in New York City, and I remember driving around in New York City, going under bridges and underpasses, and if you're near the pillar, because it's curved like this, it's too low when you're near the pillar, and you got to get out into the middle to get your vehicle underneath it. So those are some other things to consider. Janet, when I was doing my run in my school bus and wheelchair lift vans, I'd been to different places, and that's the part I like about my job. Okay, when I was driving on the expressway the first time while driving school wheelchair lift vans, my mother looked at me very shocked that I drove well for the first time. Janet, I could drive around town all day. It's a good challenge. It's a huge challenge getting a tractor trailer around town. My friend Epic is here. Really like that example of what Georgia did. Give licenses without a road test. They won't work in the Northeast because they have narrow urban freeways that lack acceleration lanes or ramps. No, it's not any different in the Northeast, Epic. And, I get that a lot from drivers. Oh, we live in LA and there's no way that you could do that in LA and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, oh, we're bigger, tougher, this, that, and phooey. You could drive as well in the Northeast as you could in Georgia. There's no big deal. Wheelman, right corners blindsiding, correct? Yes, right corners, when you're going around right corners, Wheelman, you're definitely blindsiding. You're really trying to get that trailer around there because you're looking back 75 feet in a mirror that's about this big in that little convex mirror to try and see where your trailer tires are. All right, so, yeah. Anyway, we were talking about interstates. The reason that the interstate system was built in the United States of America was so that people could escape cities. And little did Eisenhower know when he took on the initiative of building the interstate systems in the United States to evacuate cities during the Cold War, was the exponential population growth of these cities in the United States. And needless to say, when the interstate systems were built in the 1950s, they simply will not accommodate today's traffic volumes and to have mass evacuations of cities. I mean, you could do it, but it would take a long time. For example, to evacuate, say, San Diego. It would probably take you a couple of days to get everybody out, even with the interstate systems in those large cities. So this was the reason that interstates were built. The other thing to keep in mind is that, yes, interstates move huge amounts of traffic in and around urban centers. Most of the large cities in the United States and other countries in the world have ring roads around them to move traffic away from the city. Instead of traffic going through the center of the city and then coming out the other side, they simply go on the ring road. Some of the ring roads do work. Some of the ring roads do not work. I know that if you're going south on Interstate 75 through, say, Cincinnati, Ohio, for example, then it's way out of your way to go on the ring road around Cincinnati, Ohio. It's just way easier to go through the center of town. That's one of the downfalls of ring roads. Epic, speaking of urban freeways, some of them are dating back from the 1940s and 50s, which are missing the much longer acceleration lanes commonly found on post-1960s. Entries on these are risky. Yeah, and basically, Epic, you just need to get your foot into it. Yeah, they do exist. So, but, they are making amends. Most of the freeways and interstates in North America are now, have now gotten rid of the on-ramps, off-ramps that are one and the same. I don't know what the name for those is, but you come out onto the freeway and that's the on-ramp, and then the off-ramp exits at the same time. They've gotten rid of those because they are far too dangerous and there's way too much going on. So they've amended most of those. And it's the same thing, Epic, with those short acceleration lanes that they have. You're going to see those going. They're going to be gotten rid of as they fix the highways, they make them better, and make them, just lengthen out those on-ramps. Damon, I'm a bit concerned that some of the viaducts around here in San Antonio are looking rather old. What activism has to take place in order to get those viaducts demolished and rebuilt? Basically, Damon, to get those rebuilt, you need to lobby you need to figure out which authorities are responsible for that first, and most of that's going to be local politicians and whatnot, and then the transportation authority, whoever that is probably going to be the Department of Transport there in Texas. You're going to have to lobby them as well. You might even have to go as high as the governor of Texas to start moving that forward and getting people involved to replace those older bridges and whatnot. Farron, hello, my friend. How are you? Eric, nope, except during rush hour during the night. Okay, that's not for me. Wheelman, what I find very disconcerting is when inadvertently I place my truck in boxed in conditions as in cities as in dead ends. Yeah, been there a couple of times, Wheelman, where you get lost or you end up in a suburban area or something like that, and you have to get the truck back out, and most of the time you have to back up and you have to get it around a corner on the blind side. That is just that's the worst. I got lost in Cambridge once, and that's what happened. I got lost in a suburban area. Next thing you know, I'm up on a road. It's a dead end, and there's cars on both sides, and you got to back up. You're by yourself. It's usually at night, so you don't have as good a view and those types of things. So yeah, absolutely terrible. So there are some interesting things. So awesome. Farron is good. Brilliant. And you're going into fall, you're going into winter. Yes. However, being an electrical engineer, you can tune up the electric heaters and keep yourself toasty warm. Okay. So freeways and interstates, obviously there's some problems with freeways and interstates. Some of the older ones, as Epic was saying, have short acceleration lanes. Some of them have stop signs on them in the United States, which tends to add confusion to a lot of people. One of the things I want to iterate and stress is that, we talk about right away. I've had conversations, actually, I had a few people have a go at me that when they're on the freeway, they don't have to move over, they don't have to slow down, they don't have to help other people. But again, we talk about social driving and talking about helping other people out, because driving is a social activity, right? So if you can slow down a little bit, and I'm not talking about braking and slowing down 20 or 30 miles an hour on the freeway to help people move out onto the freeway and merge. What I'm talking about is simply lifting your foot off the throttle, slowing down 3 or 4 kilometers an hour or 33 or 4 miles an hour, and then speeding up again to allow the person to merge over in front of you. There was one video that I watched where a young person was trying to merge out onto the freeway. They got out on the acceleration lane and they froze, right? I don't know whether they had a mentor with them or what happened, but there's a tractor trailer there, and the tractor trailer didn't even move, didn't slow down, didn't speed up. It wasn't a tractor trailer, it was just a truck, a bobtail truck. All they had to do was let off the throttle and the person would have moved over in front of them, and the crisis would have been averted. But no, the young person drove right into the side of the bobtail truck. And I put some responsibility on the bobtail truck, because you driving a bus or truck are a professional driver, and it's not a matter of if other people are going to make mistakes. It's a matter of when other people are going to make mistakes. The definition of a professional driver is somebody who knows that other drivers are going to make mistakes and makes allowances and compensates for those other people who make mistakes. So for example, you're coming up and when you're driving down the interstate, down the freeway or motorway, you know where the on-ramps are and the exit ramps are, because you're driving a truck. This is what you do every day of your life. You take note of those, and if you're watching the on-ramp and you see the vehicle coming out, and you try to move over if you can, because you can see it from about a half a kilometer back, quarter mile, and you can move over, or you can slow down and adjust your speed accordingly to match the speed of the person who's getting on and off the freeway, and that way it's going to help them out, it's going to help you out, and it's going to make everything safer, because for the most part, freeways, motorways, interstates are safer. They are safer. They're designed to be safer, because that's why they don't have any slow-moving vehicles. They don't have any intersections, and traffic is moving in the same direction. And it's less fatal when traffic is moving in the same direction if, in fact, they do collide. However, sometimes things go wrong on interstates and freeways, and we've seen those horrific crashes, those pileups, 100-car crashes and pileups and those types of things. And oftentimes people are not paying attention on freeways and those types of things. So you gotta pay attention. You gotta keep your head in the game, because if you don't keep your head in the game, you're gonna get into trouble, especially when you're freeways and interstates and whatnot. Lightning says it's very cold in South Africa. Damon, the compound access and egress lanes are known as auxiliary lanes. Okay, so that's what they're called there in Texas. Epic, those are called weave lanes, where the exit and entry ramps are the same. Excellent, I'll write that down so I can... lanes. Okay, entry ramps, there's some in New York. If you look at the driver's manual for both New York and New Jersey, exiting traffic has the right of way over entry. Okay. Wheelman, how do you handle road rage, that's a completely another topic, wheelman. But you know, don't engage. That's the easiest way to deal with road rage. Fair and defensive driving is a must. Very important. I do it all the time. I prepare myself for when an accident happens, not wondering if it will happen. Yeah, so essentially what you need to do, Farron, is you need to be prepared. You need to manage space around your vehicle. If you can manage space around your vehicle, you're less likely to be involved in a crash. Yes, Damon. Very much regional thing in terms of weave lanes, auxiliary lanes, and those types of things. Many things have different names depending where you are in the world. I have learned that very much about regionalism and whatnot. So, all right, so I have another appointment, so unfortunately I have to leave it there for today. And we didn't talk as much about freeways, but maybe I'll revisit that tomorrow. And we'll definitely, for Wheelman there, we'll definitely talk about road rage again. And as I said previously, Saturday's the last live stream. And Saturday will be the last live stream, and I'm going to get the channel back to making videos and getting going here and moving all of this forward. So have a great day, and remember, pick the best answer, not necessarily the right answer. All the best. Bye now.